What the fastest way you've seen someone ruin their life?
When I was in college in the early 2000s, a sophomore drove his car into a bunch of kids out partying on a Saturday a block and a half from where I was living. He was going 60 to 70 miles per hour, sweeping cars parked on the side of the road before he hit the crowd. I think 4 people died. He got out screaming nonsense before being tackled. Was on a handful of drugs. Last I heard he was in a mental facility.
Friend had dived off a fraternity balcony while drunk into a parking lot. He now has a half a brain and is wheelchair bound. High school acquaintances were partying underage, and some other kids with drama were buzzing the party in some stupid loud car. Drunk guy thinks the best way to handle this is to throw a huge paving stone at the car on one of its passes. Stone goes through window, hits passenger, mid-body lap, not head, driver panics, and refuses to take passenger to hospital. Apparently everybody was under the influence. She bled out of internal injuries in the hours that followed. Guy who threw the stone is still in prison for manslaughter. Sorry, whoa, here are some answers to the best of my ability. No charges against the driver. Sorry, yes, still in jail, very reticent from all reports, was trying to mess up car, not people, doesn't excuse it, just a detail about intent. Also, I should have maybe rephrased how I know of these people. We were high school age when we met briefly, not I knew them through my own high school.
I had a friend years back, always kind of an odd guy, but he had a good heart. Anyway, one day, I was hanging out with him and a few other friends, and he told us he was going to get a tattoo tomorrow, and had this super cool idea, but he wouldn't tell us what it was because he wanted it to be a surprise. We saw him about a week later. He had tattooed 3/4 of his face green. Like, no design or anything, just solid dark forest green. Basically, he just left the top right quarter of his face normal, and the rest was all green. He had been immediately fired from his job the day after getting the tattoo. I kind of lost touch with him shortly after that, since he moved to another city. I'd heard he wound up living in his car. No idea why he did what he did. He had a very good job in it at a pretty big company and was making decent money. No clue why he thought permanently turning 3/4 of his face green would be super awesome.
Crack. One of my friends went from being moderately functional to losing any custody of his daughter and bouncing in and out of rehabs within like 6 months. 2 years later, and he has a wanted poster with his face all over it in Tennessee.
Really good friend of mine in college was still living with his parents and had this absolute ditz of a girlfriend who also lived with him at his parents'. They were both 19 at the time and decided to try for a baby. Except neither of them had jobs or even their own place. They also did not tell his parents beforehand, wanting it to be a surprise, genuinely thinking it would make each other and their parents so happy. Now she's off doing meth again, and he's living with his parents still working at Wendy's, while his parents takes care of his daughter. All of his income goes to helping take care of her.
When I lived in Vegas, I saw all these people come in and bet it all on black, then lose. Then the stare of disbelief as they realize their mortgage is gone, and they have to explain that to whomever they had left at home.
About 50 years ago, when my great-uncle was in his early 20s, he drove home so drunk that he ran over and killed 2 college students and didn't even realize it. After his initial incarceration, he didn't know how to function as a free citizen, so he keeps getting himself sent back to jail. For example, he got out of jail around a year ago and couldn't make his first month's rent. His solution was to walk to the convenience store, steal a beer, and sit on the curb waiting for the cops to arrive. I was there when my older brother tried heroin for the first time. Fast forward 15 years and he is constantly going to the hospital for abscesses that appear on his arms and legs, and is almost completely cut off from the rest of the family because he's robbed our parents more than once. Every few years he swears he is going to kick the habit. The first few times we collectively ponied up cash to send him to rehab and tried to be as supportive as we could. After the 10th relapse or so, we're too exhausted to even pretend to be hopeful about his newest attempt to get clean. Edit. Thanks for all of the positive feedback.
New guy at a factory celebrated finally finding a job by doing a shot at the bar next door during lunch. Got fired after 4 hours of work for it.
If you like what you see, please comment, like and subscribe.
Dropped out of a very good college with a full scholarship that his family could never have afforded otherwise after 3 years due to World of Warcraft addiction. No, this wasn't me. I managed my addiction responsibly. Edit. We are thinking of different guys. The fact that dozens of replies are "Hey, I know this guy" is disconcerting but not unexpected. Edit. I played WoW from release through Cataclysm, but never really had a problem walking away from it to focus on life, which is probably the experience of most of the player base. After I quit, I started having intrusive thoughts about relapsing, even 8 years later, but have never felt that I'd give in to that.
I am friends with a guy and through him knew his younger sister. Smart, pretty, cool. She was doing well in college. Meets a guy and decided to get married after a few weeks without telling anyone. So she moves in with him and all of a sudden he has too much back pain to work, so she's trying to take classes and support them both. He lays around all day smoking pot which she buys for his pain, while she does school and waits tables all night. She also likes to party with him. It's revealed they've both been doing a lot of acid. She, of course, drops out of college a few credits short of graduating. By this point her parents and friends are begging her to come to her senses and take their help to get back and finish college, invite both of them to move in and do all the drugs they want, as long as she finishes school. Her and the husband decided the student loans, plus both his and her car loans are too much, so they parked the cars at the bank with notes in the windshield that they do not want them anymore and disappeared. They left a note for her parents that they were moving out west or to Mexico and haven't been heard from in over 15 years. My friend heard rumors that the guy was pimping his sister out at one point, but that was after they left that he heard, too late to do anything. About 5 years ago he told me he thinks she's probably dead, but the parents are expecting her to come back any day now. The parents used to be joyous people. Edit. Since this is blowing up there's more context. She loved her parents so much and didn't want to go away to college, she commuted to a university in the city. She was a junior when she met him. We smoked weed and she always looked down on us for it, so her doing acid and weed and ecstasy all of the sudden was really shocking. The family wasn't very religious, but the husband got her obsessed with the Book of Revaluations, and one of the interactions I had with her we were all high, and she told me that the world was ending soon, and I needed to read Revaluations. They disappeared on purpose to get out of all the loan debt. It's believed that they changed identities. There's some confusion amongst the friend group if the guy was Mormon or not, but my closest friend is convinced she's living in a fundamentalist Mormon cult in northern Mexico, which he says is a thing. I agree with the brother that they both probably got into harder drugs and she's dead. There's addiction in the family and she went from not drinking to daily wheat acid rolls so quick. And moving away from family to pursue drugs is classic addict behavior.
Went to school with a kid who threw a rock off an overpass and killed a dude. Whole life down the drain at that point. Made international news. Edit. Flint, Michigan.
I was 14 and visiting family in Vietnam. A dude on a motorcycle blazed by on a highway and a few miles later, I saw several feet of his brains spilled on the road.
I had a friend in college who had a tendency to act before thinking, but was generally fun and well-meaning. After I had graduated, my friend apparently got coerced by a woman he was trying to sleep with to try heroin just once. As I heard it, he refused initially, then caved because he felt pressured. My friend overdosed and died. Just like that, one bad decision ended his life. Rip Mike. A 20-year-old man just killed a woman and her 3 daughters under 6 years old today by recklessly evading police and running a red light in Brampton, Ontario. He is just suffering a broken leg.
Works in the German social welfare system Beerbeater im Island. A client of mine said he thinks that my calculations would be wrong after his wife left him because he got not enough money. I asked him if he had any expenses I didn't know of. He was sure he gave me all infos. I asked him to bring me all his invoices, vouchers, receipts etc., which he did a few days later. I read all his papers and found a pay slip that I didn't know of. According to my files, he got social welfare at this time, and I had no infos that he had a job with income, which would be social welfare fraud. I kept reading and I found a so-called Versicherungspolice insurance policy for a 5er BMW. You should know that back in the day a car was a salvageable capital. He had to have his car sold to use that money for groceries etc. It was mid-90s, it's different now. Then I found the purchase contract for the car expensive and with installment payments. Then I found the contract with the bank that gave him the loan for the car. So I called the bank and asked them why the hell they are giving a loan that big to unemployed social welfare recipients. The woman from the bank began to panic because that's new information to her. And while she was trying to explain what happened, the loan had burst because my client didn't pay etc. I figured out that something is wrong with the pay slip. You should know that in Germany, the 4-digit postal code including the sublocal code, like 1000 Berlin 44, was changed to a 5-digit postal code, 12,345 Berlin, in 1993. The payslip was from 1995, but the postal code on that thing was from 1993. He forged a payslip to get the loan to get the car, because his wife told him he needed a better car to keep her. So he did all this but 2 bubble burst because he couldn't afford to pay the installments. And just because he asked me to recalculate him and brought all his infos without sorting them out properly, I was able to prove that he committed some felonies, which, BTW, doesn't mean that he ends up in jail, or that he gets arrested, etc. He told me this story, I said what I have to do now and what might happen in the next weeks. Both have been charged and convicted of social welfare fraud, insurance fraud, falsification of documents, and sneaking bank loans using fake income information.
Early 90s, my friend was a sweet theater nerd who went to the same college as me. She started hanging out with a sketchy crowd and ignoring her old friends, especially when we tried to tell her she was losing herself. She ended up moving to Seattle to hang with her new friends. Growing up, she was the most sober person in her group. She never even drank alcohol, much less did any drugs, but 6 months later, she was dead of a heroin overdose.
My stupid ex-girlfriend, in an effort to pay back a loan shark, maced the opening manager of a Blockbuster and stole the bank deposit bags. Then, she went and picked up her niece and nephews, all under age 8, and causally drove around with them. She got felony stopped on a major roadway. Her photo was on the top stories at 10 lead into that evening's news. This happened during the NBA Finals that year. I think it was during Game 6 or 7, so huge viewing audience. Oh, she was daily recognized and apprehended because her best friend was store manager of that Blockbuster, and she was there all the time. And she had dripped off an application the day before. She spent the next 3 years in a women's prison.
She took MLM seriously, invested into it. Lost friends, everyone and money. Simple.
Once my friend told me how he wanted to lose his virginity to his cousin and many other things about his cousin. His cousin's father was right behind him listening to everything he said. Less than 24 hours. My ex-neighbor's ex-girlfriend went on a racist road rage rant that got filmed. It went viral on Twitter. I remember reading the news article and thinking about her for some reason. She wasn't named. It wasn't until months later that I found out it was her. She was fired from her $300,000 a year job next day and immediately started getting death threats. She had to move in with her boyfriend. She tried getting a job, but people would look her up and be like, WTF. She spent $10,000 on a reputation defender, changed her name, was shunned by many family and friends. Her boyfriend, who she wanted to marry, broke up with her because he couldn't stand the months of depression. She ended up leaving the state.
Knew a guy, and when I was younger, he was a stud tight end in high school and college, but had a drinking problem. He had pro stats, size, speed, etc. Got a tryout in the NFL. Flew to town, went out, got fucked up and never woke up in time for the tryout. Showed up half a day late and they wouldn't let him in. Flew home and now he does mortgages working like the rest of us. Me and a friend were at a party and 2 girls took us to a back room for some fooling around. My friend was giving one of the girls a massage as she lay face down on a pile of cushions. She pulled her skirt up, hooked her underpants to one side and said, "Fuck me." My friend was a virgin at this point, couldn't believe his luck and pulled out his dick and stuck it in. Came literally as he entered her. And that's how he became a parent at 17. He loves his kid, but that event messed him up so much, it effectively destroyed his education, job prospects, and caused major issues in his immediate family that are still going on today.
I had a friend, my old and first best friend in middle school. We were closer than my actual brother, and same for him. He was without a doubt my rock and I was his. He was a very, very good and talented marching drummer in general. The dude was learning college licks and rudiments top tier in literal hours. It was fucking insane. He got to play with UCLA and USC's drumline at 14 and didn't miss a beat with them. His mom unfortunately passed away when he was 15. He turned to heavy drugs, insane amount of drinking and fucking anything that walked. I recently saw him in the beginning of March and I won't lie, I didn't even recognize him. It took me a solid 30 seconds to realize who it was that was calling my name. Extremely skinny, bags under eyes, greasy hair and dirty teeth. I felt fucking terrible. I couldn't do anything. But what could I do? He ran away from home, dropped out of school, wasn't on any social media, had no contact with family and honestly, had no family at all besides his dad, and 2 extremely distant cousins and a brother in the Marines. I haven't seen or heard from him since. He could have passed away and I wouldn't have known. In the Air Force, this new guy joins and goes out to a bar, then decides to drive home. Gets a DUI. loses all his rank, has to pay a ton in fines, but leadership fought for him, and he was allowed to stay in the Air Force. 2 months later, as he's paying tons of lawyer and legal fees, he does something really stupid, drives home from the same bar drunk and gets arrested. Loses his license and gets kicked out of the military, so loses all his income while he's thousands of dollars in debt. That's not even the worst part. A few months later, he celebrates being a civilian again by, you guessed it, going to the same bar, then driving home drunk. Arrested and put in jail for a while. I can't imagine he has many future career opportunities with a less than honorable discharge and an arrest record. Edit. I should have added that the third DUI included charges for driving without a license, since he had it suspended after the second.
So in conclusion. 1. Don't say racist stuff. 2. Don't ever try heroin. 3. Don't drive drunk. 4. Don't throw rocks off a bridge. 5. Don't use a crossbow and you should be good.
Abusing Xanax and alcohol fucked my life up pretty good pretty quickly, crashed my car, got dumped by my girlfriend, failed all my college classes, and made a bunch of people hate me all in the span of like 2 months. Haven't touched Xanax in years and managed to somewhat pull my life back together.
I went to a rich high school. After graduating, 2 kids went to be camp counselors. One night they got drunk and drove back to the camp. They hit a tree, the passenger died. The kid driving was from a family worth 8 figures, smart, good enough looking, popular. On his way to a top-tier university. 20 years in prison. The passenger's family begged for no prison time, but the judge said tough shit.
A former acquaintance was playing around with a homemade crossbow that I'd helped him with. I was massively into archery and fletching, and he seemed serious about it. I typically made him leave it with me because deadly weapon, I have an explanation, he kinda didn't. Anyway, to convince his parents to let him join an archery club, he wanted to show off the crossbow we made. I thought it was a decent plan, so let him take it without any ammo. Turns out he was gaming me to get more playtime with his favorite toy, had gotten hold of some bolts, and was fucking around shooting his shed a fair bit. He somehow ended up firing a bolt that missed the shed completely, passed between the slats on his vents, and hit his neighbor's daughter in the spine. She hasn't walked since. He got fucked up real bad by her unstable older brother. They both did jail time. Acquaintance was disowned and ended up homeless, and now I'm not sure where they are in life. Edit. I've had a few people comment that even a stable person would want to fuck up someone for something like this. Truth told, I half agree. I still feel like it's important information to the situation, however, and just want to qualify the statement. The beating he got was brutal, involved a crowbar, and left him with a broken femur. The difference between wanting to do something like that and actually acting on it is important. Also, we were 18 at the time, the girl was 12, her brother 21, for all those asking. Edit 2. The brother had a history of anger management issues and drug abuse, and a small list of prior misdemeanors. This man isn't someone you should be elevating just because his negativity was concentrated on someone who you say deserved it. I'm not here to argue about the ethics of his actions or whether or not his instability was a factor in his reaction. It was. Stable people don't find revelry in inflicting grievous bodily harm on others. 2 wrongs, eye for an eye, and all that.
I'm my own perfect example for this. Started abusing meth and hanging with all the wrong people. Within 3 months I wrecked my car, lost my home, my relationship went up in flames, and I caught some misdemeanors and felonies when I had only ever had speeding tickets before then. Now I'm on probation for the next several years, or until I can pay off the thousands I owe the court, stuck living with my parents at 34, single, jobless, and struggling massively with anxiety and depression. Yay bad choices. Yay consequences. I was a licensed firearms owner in Canada, and I sold a handful of handguns to my crack dealer when I was still smoking a few years back, and it caught up to me 3 years after I got sober. I'm going to court for sentencing in a couple of months, with the prosecutor seeking 6 to 8 years. And although it may not seem like that much in the grand scheme of things, but since I quit smoking crack, I got my driver's license, started my own construction business, and I'm in a 4-year relationship with an amazing woman who was the reason for my getting sober. All of that is going to be gone, and my grandpa, who is the only family who raised me I have left, will most likely be gone because of him being 84. I'm not sure where you would count the life being ruined. The second I made the decision to sell the firearms, the second the RCMP and local police pulled me over with 20 cars in morning rush hour, my name being put in the newspaper with my crime, or when I get sentenced in a few months. I've decided it was the second I made the decision. It helps to be insane. I say that as someone who is certifiably bonkers. I worked with an engineer at a manufacturing facility at one point in my career. We'll call him Bob Dobbs. We had defense-related contracts with major players like Boeing. It was not this man's job to design anything, but to do manufacturing shit. At some point, within a year of my arriving, he began answering the phone with customers as Bob Dobbs, engineering manager, and insisting that all communication go through him. He got away with this for nearly 3 months, until someone called the actual engineering manager asking for Bob Dobbs, the engineering manager. Due no small part to the what the fuckery involved, a review of Bob Dobbs' work began. He had been redesigning optimizing customer designs before they went to production. There was almost $1 million of scrap sitting on the shop floor. He was terminated and began a career delivering pizza.
The guy I went to high school with thought he'd make good bank selling his medical dexamphetamines to other school kids, no matter what the age. He used to say dad says ADHD is quack science, but mom gets them for me anyway, so whatever. One of the local gangs found out he was dealing on the sly in their turf. He saved himself from a hospital trip by agreeing to deal for them and help mule stuff into the local federal prison. He thought he could get away with it because his father was a co there. He forgot he lived in a small town, and some local he supplied there eventually ratted him out to save themselves. Idiot's son was charged and caught a 10-year sentence. Didn't matter, he was 17, he was done. Father barely saved his job after it was confirmed he was innocent and not involved, was very lucky to hush up the whole thing with the union behind him. Son was disowned, wore all the blame, and is a pariah dog now to anyone who ever knew him.
My sister's husband first, this guy was completely worthless and a liar. Do you know how you can meet someone and instantly know just by looking in his face that he's scum? That was him when I first met him. My sister moved in with him, got pregnant from him, married him. Almost 3 years ago they were still married and raising 2 daughters. They got evicted but managed to somehow find a new place to move into, amazing, given how most apartments will not rent to you if you've ever been evicted, and within 3 months they were getting evicted again. Now, he had a job when they were dating. At this point their oldest daughter is 15 years old, almost 16, and she has no memory of her dad ever having a job. His solution to avoiding eviction was to tell my sister to call everyone in her phone's contact list and beg for money, while he did some black tar heroin and got drunk, explains why they had no money for rent. She called her stepbrother's wife, a woman who makes well into the 6 figures. She could loan you $5,000 faster than a payday loan company. She and I get along great, but I'd never ask her for money. We aren't close enough for that, even though she'd probably be willing. She was willing to give them the money, no strings, no need to pay it back. Our stepmom told her not to do it. They are in this mess because of their bad choices, and to let them figure out the solution on their own. Then stepmom called me and told me about my sister begging for money and not to loan 1 red cent. I bailed my sister out of jail the year before, and she didn't believe that she should pay me back the bail money. I learned not to give my sister any money. 2 hours later I was visiting there to see my sister. When the family refused to bail my sister and her family out of their situation, my sister's husband snapped. He beat my sister, choked her until she passed out. My sister says that she believed that she was going to die at that point, put her nose in his mouth, and ripped 1 nostril off her face. When the 15-year-old daughter saw this, she grabbed a sword and was going to kill him. He knocked the sword from her and choke-slammed her into the ground. He was arrested while yelling angrily and asking for someone, anyone, to kill him. He remained in jail until his trial. No one bailed him out. Some were willing to until they learned what he did. Then they decided that he was best left behind bars. The state, Texas, wanted 25 years for the savage, almost animalistic attack on my sister, as well as the attack on the daughter. Since he had no prior arrests, he was sentenced to a 6-month boot camp-like program followed by parole upon successful completion of the program. He was also ordered to go through alcohol and drug counseling, as well as anger management. Restraining order against him from my sister and their kids. Double felon, assault on his wife, assault on a minor, who can't own any form of a weapon. On probation for like 10 years, where if he fucks up he can get his parole taken away and go back for the full 25 years. Not only can he not own a weapon, but there is random drug and alcohol testing. He has to pay for the testing, his monthly PO visits, paid child support, as well as restitution on top monthly bills, such as rent and utilities. Every so often I search his name to see what pops up. He's been arrested a few more times. One was over the course of Thanksgiving the first year after he completed the program, and last year he was picked up for public intoxication and giving the arresting officer a false name. He hasn't paid any money in child support, nor has he made any effort to see. He is allowed chaperone visitation, Or even contact them. Direct contact is not allowed, but they can go through lawyers.
A guy I knew that was in all the advanced classes and shit decided against college and went for MLM instead. His life isn't ruined per se, but anyone that has contact with him, and from what I can tell he has new jobs all the time. It's more like a wasted potential story, I guess. I lost contact with him after he tried to get me to join an MLM. I said this sounds like a pyramid scheme, and the guy ahead of him got on the line and yelled at me for like 2 minutes straight. He texted an apology after and we haven't talked since.
A kid I knew was fucking around with a handgun at a party and spun it around with his finger trying to look cool. He blew his head off right in front of everybody. It's a miracle that nobody else got shot, and a lot of people who weren't there think that it was intentional, but it wasn't. He was 20 years old.
That woman who called the cops on the bird-watching gentleman in Central Park. That video lasted a minute or so. I'm pretty sure she will never get as good a job as she had ever again. I just witnessed an 18-year-old kid that nearly killed his 14 to 17-year-old friends going 70+ miles per hour running from a cop after fleeing an illegal burn. The driver lost control and crashed the car. The kid had the audacity to say, "I'm a minor, any charges won't stick." That cop hit him with 1 felony of reckless endangerment for each kid he hurt, a DUI, and several other charges, given that the two 14-year-olds both stopped breathing on the way to the hospital. Oh yeah, those charges are going to stick. The driver seemed to lack any remorse in the way he spoke of the event, but also had no idea that we had to resuscitate 2 of his friends halfway to the hospital. Initially, he was heard stating that his charges would be dropped due to his age, but I hope that changed as he learned the condition of his friends. From boozy Friday night party to near life-ending mistake in a matter of minutes. All the kids are healing well. Edited to add clarification on illegal burn. We can't have bonfires because COVID destroyed firefighting resources, and we simply cannot risk it. Also, I don't know how cops press charges, but they are involved in it in some way. Sorry, I don't know how that system works. I just put the band-aids on you when you get hurt. Edited again to add. As this has gained some traction, I would like to add that it was not my intent to imply that I wish the most extreme or most lax justice on this kid. I'm not the judge nor the jury, that's not my call. I simply put the band-aids on injured people. Part of my oath as an EMT is to provide unbiased care to all people that I serve regardless of the situation. However, I am still human and must cope with intense and awful emotions from time to time from the nature of my work. This call hurt me, and perhaps that can be seen in the words I initially chose. Venting those emotions and resulting frustrations on sources like Reddit genuinely helps me cope with the things I see and do, as it is an easy way to throw out anger to a vague source, rather than harbor it and let it change me. However, it is always my highest priority to provide genuine compassion to all my patients in person, regardless of their role in the tragedy. I do believe there are worthy consequences for the driver's choices, but I also believe that all of the patients in that car were somebody's babies, and I think it is important to act on the latter belief as often as possible. We need more love in this world, especially now, and if for no other reason, selfishly, to remind me how important it is to always strive to be kind even when I'm hurt. Thanks for reading, Reddit.
I had an acquaintance who was pretty successful, early 30s, good job, homeowner, etc. His next-door neighbors had custody of their niece, a 16-year-old cheerleader who was home alone all the time. They struck up a friendship. Need I say more? Actually, yes. The cops stop him randomly with her in the passenger seat. They ID her since she looks young. Call her guardians, who deny that he has permission to take her anywhere. Here's the thing. They had crossed a county line. Boom, kidnapping charge. They break him in interrogation, and he admits to sex. Boom, statutory rape charges. They convince him to unlock his phone and find her nudes in his inbox. Boom, child pornography charges. Boom goes the cell door.
The Redditors who tries heroin to see if it's as bad as everyone says. TLDR, it is.
You probably heard about that guy who sold everything he had just to play it in a casino and winning double of what he owned. It was everywhere on the news. Yeah, a guy I know did the same exact thing and lost every single penny he had. He had a huge depression after that.
My boss has a saying, you're only one more drink and one stupid comment away from losing your career. That being said, I watched a former coworker pull a beanie toward the crown of his head and say, check it out, I look like Brian's cock. Brian was his uncircumcised subordinate, sitting right across from him. My former coworker was out of a job within a month, divorced within 6, and living on the streets within 3 years.
This one is a bit more tragic, I say. There was this guy I knew years ago. By all accounts, doing pretty well for himself, job, girlfriend, house, nice little sports car, the whole shebang. Well, one evening he is out for a drive on a country road and he is speeding. Car goes into the dirt next to the road and he tries to correct, which unfortunately fails. Car goes into a field, flips over and he was not wearing a seatbelt. He didn't make it. All happened within a span of a few seconds.
Couple of guys I knew in college were Division I athletes, but for a niche sport nobody really followed. One night they got drunk and decided it would be a great idea to bleach their initials into the AstroTurf on the football field. Really bad idea, but it got so much worse. Turns out bleach and AstroTurf create a chemical reaction. Fire. They burned down the entire field of a Division I football stadium. Caused hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages. Made national news. It was bad. Everybody thought they did it on purpose, like some kind of terrorist act. Their only defense was, no, we're not terrorists, we're just idiots. Saddest part was, they got expelled from college in their senior years, didn't graduate, and kind of descended into losserdom almost immediately. Typing this is bumming me out.
That guy on Reddit who decided to use heroin just for fun once and became addicted and in a mental hospital, I think.
A teacher I worked with was arrested for possession of images of children. There was a huge sting operation where they brought down a network of people, him included. Friend. Hey dude, I've been thinking about getting into Warhammer 40k.
It was the guy's first day and he got fired after that. Had to go back to bartending.
I'm sure a million people have already said it, but heroin. It's not true that you try it once and you're immediately hooked for life. I actually think that myth does more harm than good because when people try it and don't get addicted right away, they assume the hype is all bullshit and they're free to keep using. It's fine for a little while. Everything just feels nice. You think you've finally figured it all out. Like you're in on some big secret. Until suddenly it isn't fine anymore. And before you know it, you're in too deep. And then you're gone. I knew this guy in my 20s. He was kind of new to our little group. He brought this girl around. She was trying to fuck everybody. I didn't know him that well, but I tried to tell him about her. He didn't believe me and took her side. We stopped talking. When she was trying to fuck me one night, she told me he had a premature ejaculation problem and he was really lame in bed. She specified she really needed some good dick because he seriously only lasts like a minute. I wasn't interested in her and politely declined. Anyway, I didn't actually see it, but a few months later, I heard he got her pregnant. The fastest I know of someone ruining their life was about a minute. Edit. Wow. Didn't expect this to blow up like it did. To answer some of your questions. That happened. It was about 10 years ago. He cut our whole group off so nobody knows any details. I suspect it's 50-50 whether it was his or not, but I'll probably never know.
Kid in Chicagoland, 20 years old, jumped in front of a train last weekend because he looked at his investment app and it said he was in debt $730K. The app updated on Monday and he was back to even. He left a suicide note with a screenshot of the app. Robinhood.
Ex-girlfriend started doing heroin, ended up robbing a convenience store and running over a clerk during the getaway. She's serving 15 to 20 years in jail. I've told this story before, but I recently found out where the girl is now. I went to high school with a girl who got pregnant about halfway through my 11th grade year. At the time she was with a guy and the guy claimed that he was indeed the father. Fast forward a couple months into the pregnancy and they break up and the ex-boyfriend is now saying there's no way the kid is his and that she was pregnant before they ever had sex. She refutes this, says it has to be his kid because there's been nobody else. She keeps trying to get the guy to admit that the kid is his, but eventually backs off because in a fucked up turn of events she gets with her ex's cousin. The baby is born while she's still with cousin and things seem to calm down until her and the cousin break up. She then starts claiming that the child is either her ex's and he should be paying child support, or that because she had been with the cousin he should support her and the child. She's so convinced that she decided to take them both to court. The court runs paternity tests on both men and determined that neither were the father and as such should not have to support her. Because of all this she lost a lot of money from court fees, is a single mother who last I heard wasn't with anybody and currently works at McDonald's. This all spiraled over the course of about a year and a half to 2 years.
Was dating a girl whose little sister got knocked up when she was around 17. 6 months pregnant, drinking straight vodka at a family party. I pointed it out to then GF family did nothing. Mother didn't care, didn't want to smell the bottle of water, said it was a lie. Baby mama trapped some guy with the "you're the father" speech around month 8 of pregnancy. I, behind the scene, paid for a DNA test for him. Baby wasn't his. He mentally broke as soon as he heard it. Baby mama didn't care, laughed it off, she was just trying to nail down someone with a job, she has no clue who the father was. Baby was born with bad type of fetal alcohol syndrome. She's 10 now, severely disabled grandmother takes care of her baby mama, still does hard drugs, and passes out birthday blowjobs. Many lives ruined. The one that sticks out the most was the guy who was supposedly the father watched joy disappear from one second to the next in his eyes. The rest don't care, and it's sickening. Edit 1. Did some digging, turns out the wannabe baby daddy died of an odd 3 years ago.
I work at a shelter. We had this one kid living with us. His parents abandoned him when he was 6, so the people and kids living and working at the shelter were all the family he had left. In the months before his 18th birthday he made some serious debt, so we gave him the chance to stay longer with us, pay everything off before moving out. But this guy was kinda stupid, and so on the day of his 18th birthday, he signed a lease for a flat, where he lived together with the girlfriend and kids of an older friend, against all of our advice. At least he got a caretaker for his finances, so we thought things might eventually turn out okay. But we were wrong. He ignored caretaker's calls, threw a party where he gave strong alcohol to minors, and got kicked out eventually. Then he lost his job. Then the friend who took him in after said party kicked him out. And he is still in debt without work or home. Just because he thought he was smart and didn't want to live under our rules once he turned 18.
My friend had a full-ride scholarship to a university in Georgia and got in with the wrong crowd and ended up going to jail for selling weed and lost her scholarship. She works at Domino's now.
I read this as funniest way someone ruined their life and thought, man, these aren't very funny.
My sister had an excellent career, friends, etc. Decides to marry some guy she barely knew. They spent 72 hours together in person and moved to another state, leaving her career, friends and family. Fast forward a couple months and she is unemployed and stuck with this guy who allegedly believes in conspiracy theories and isn't at all who she thought he was. I guess that's what you get when you marry a stranger. Guy I knew in high school left about year 11, I think. He always seemed like a decent guy, no reason to believe otherwise. Decided to hold up a service station with a fake pistol. Got shot from behind by a customer with a real one. Hit his shoulder blade, ricocheted up from there into his skull. They turned his life support off a few days later. Australia, early 90s, before Port Arthur.
Good friend of mine was working as a high school English teacher in a small conservative town. Decided impromptu to drop a flag on the floor and stomp on it when teaching a lesson on free speech. Students complained, parents and local veterans overreacted, school board fired him, had to move in cell phones, and then insurance as no school would touch him. Ruin their life is a bit strong, but had to give up his passion for just a job.
Where I live we have a lot of high schools very close to each other. I'm not sure if this is normal, but it is an important detail. To save time, I'll call my school S1 and the neighboring school S2. S2 got an anonymous tip that a student was planning to bomb the school the next day. Everyone that went to work at S2 got a day off. S1, however, was not closed. Some people complained that it wasn't fair, total bullshit, and that we should have gotten a day off as well. Fast forward to the next day at 5 a.m. I got a text saying school would be closed that day. We were in the winter months, so a snow day wouldn't be unusual. I noticed there wasn't any snow, so I texted my friend asking if he knew anything about what was going on. He said no, so I went back to bed. Woke up a couple hours later with no follow-up text from the school, so I looked to see if there was anything about the closure on the news. Apparently a girl who went to my school, S1, had made an IG post saying they were gonna shoot up the lower commons the next day. She did this because she wanted a day off, and I really hope she enjoyed it because that was the last time she'll be free for a very long time. She was charged with some kind of terrorism and sentenced to 20 years in prison. TLDR. Girl threatens to shoot up the school so we get a day off. Goes to prison for 20 years. Edit. Grammar.
A few kids from school went to this girl's cabin over winter break. One of the girls was standing on the balcony. And her boyfriend thought it would be funny to scare her. So she got started and jumped against the balcony railing, and she fell off from the 3rd floor and banged her spine against a huge rock from the ground and ended up being paralyzed from the neck down. She was supposed to be a gymnast, and her boyfriend overdosed out of guilt. Well, I'm building myself back up currently. But I was seriously addicted to drugs throughout my teen years and into early adulthood. My addiction led me to wrecking my car, losing my job, and getting kicked out of my parents' house. I ended up in rehab at age 18, which is pretty shitty to end up there so early in life. Because of this, a lot of people stopped talking to me. I lost a romantic relationship that had been the only real reason to keep living for me. This all happened within 2 weeks. I'm doing way better now and I'm 4 months sober, but I fucked my life up pretty fast.
Hey bro, watch me slap that girl's ass. Last words said by my former friend, who slapped a 13-year-old girl's ass. Mind you, he didn't notice the surveillance camera, nor the cop who was walking out of the store. He's a registered sex offender now.
I had an internship last year where during our onboarding, the company brass took everyone out to a rented bar with 2 drink tokens per person. Most of us were college students, so you were sure to have at least a couple rambunctious types. The company warned us that while we want you all to have fun, please remember to drink responsibly. People have ruined their internships with us in the past on this night. Most of us ended up having more than 2 drinks, but they had driven us there on coach buses, and they would return us to a nearby hotel afterwards, so we figured it was okay. Well, one guy definitely broke his personal limit, and what ensued was incredibly hard to watch. On the bus ride home, the kid started being obnoxiously loud. Then he stood up and started spouting off racist nonsense, something about a race war. Finally, the HR manager asked him very politely to sit down multiple times. This only pissed the kid off, who then threatened to punch the manager in the face. When we got back, the guy then tried to drive home drunk, while the HR manager frantically tried finding him a DD. I don't know whatever came of that kid, but I'm sure his internship was over after that weekend. It's crazy how you can watch someone totally throw away their career. Imagine having to go back home and try explaining to your parent guardian why you're there and not at your assignment.
One of my friends is making his name rather quickly in the fine art world and knows just about everything happening in his field. While many artists have shown support for George Floyd in BLM, my friend told me last night of an artist who publicly denounced it and promoted white superiority over his social media accounts. Essentially immediately after this was published, he was dropped from his gallery, every interested buyer turned away, and his fans and followers denounced their support and interest in him. There's no way to recover from that in the art world. Spice, synthetic weed. I had a student who started using it and his life fell apart at breakneck speed. Even faster than the kids who use meth. It was unbelievable and heartbreaking. Man, these stories are fucking sad. Which makes me feel like a total dick for reading them and thinking, I'm so glad I never fucked up that bad.
A friend brought some vodka in a water bottle to school. Someone that hung nebulously around our group that most of us didn't like snitched on her. The school had a really hardline stance on drugs, alcohol in school, so it was an immediate expulsion pretty late into her high school career. Not sure what happened to her, but I imagine if a teen has a drinking problem, expelling them from school wouldn't really be the best way to address it.
My ex cheated on me with a mentally unstable woman. He lied about working late one night to go hook up with her. She got mad at him and punished him by filing false rape charges. He was pulled over and hauled to jail 2 blocks from her apartment complex. He was locked up in the sex offender unit of one of the worst county jails in the country over Christmas. The case never went to trial. The grand jury no-billed him for lack of evidence of a crime. But he ended up losing me, losing his affair partner, losing his main job, losing his volunteer work, losing his side job, losing his savings account, ruining his credit, losing visitation with his daughters from a previous relationship, losing his car, losing most of his friends, losing several family relationships, and wound up living with his mom. He also still has the arrest record because he can't afford to have it expunged, so it shows up on every background check. It was like 4 hours between the time he called me to say he was working late and when the cops pulled him over and arrested him. In 4 hours he completely destroyed his life.
One of my relatives watched one of his friends dive into a lake headfirst, hit the bottom, and paralyze himself from the waist down. Kid at my high school got videoed saying the N-word. It went viral. He got doxxed and death threats.
Cocaine. Guy was living the dream. He owned a successful business, had a gorgeous wife, cute kid, house in the burbs and a vacation home at the coast. Within 6 months it all went up his nose. Wife left him and got total custody of their little boy. Poor lady still cared. When he was committed to the psych hospital where I worked she came to visit and even told him he could see the child if he got clean. I remember him bitching about a court-ordered 180-day outpatient substance abuse commitment. That basically means that for the first 180 days after he left the hospital, he would have to go to the mental health center every week. If he didn't show up or if his drug screen came back positive he would be sent back to the hospital. He has the chance to go home, see his son occasionally, hopefully get his life on track. And all he can do is rage and whine about the cost of transportation to the free clinic, which is in the same town he lived in.
The female person I went to high school with had sex with an underage student at her first teaching job. Ended their career before it started. The weirdest part was seeing news articles where they questioned whether or not she was hot. When someone isn't old enough to consent, it is rape.
Had a friend of mine fry his brain from doing psychedelics and other drugs way too often. It's shame because he was really smart and did really good in school. But he got himself kicked out of college. Went to another one and completed some kind of neuroscience degree. But he can't do anything with it because he's just broken. Be careful with drugs, y'all.
An ex-girlfriend of mine decided to take up heroin as a hobby. Dead within 6 months from a hotshot.
I knew a good kid hung out with my brother and went to school with him after I graduated. I didn't know him much, but my bro did. I remember bro came home one day because said kid was gonna do some meth with his friends, didn't keep in touch with him after that. 2 months later he stabbed a cop in the eye and was killed via police edit. Presumably on meth, I should say.
A split second they decided that they actually were fit to drive home after drinking. Mine isn't as bad as the other on this thread, but here we go. My cousin is currently 23. When she was 18 years old, she got pregnant. She had told the rest of the family she was pregnant very late, 2 months into pregnancy. This was the beginning of her senior year of high school. She drops out, gives birth, the father leaves, he is expected to pay childcare, but we have not heard from him since. She refuses to go back to school. She gets into weed and she ends up living with her parents. Fast forward to April 2020, my grandmother dies and there was a dispute about a diamond wedding ring that she has left for her heirs. My cousin, who is not the first heir in line to receive it, steals the ring. This is a very expensive ring, $20,000 United States dollars, and sells it for drug money. This ring was supposed to go to my sister, who was devastated. The will was written to go to the firstborn female grandchild, who is my sister. Her parent press charges, she is convicted of grand larceny, and her child is taken to foster care. She is supposed to get a 5 to 10 year sentence.
Kid in my class posted a picture of him dressed in a police costume with his knee on another kid's neck. Several captions with anti-police slurs and slogans. It was addressed by the school board, and he lost his scholarship and got booted off the varsity hockey team.
Being touchy with female subordinates during an office party. Cocaine. I knew a couple who went from nothing to multi-millionaires and lost everything. Edit. The husband started a company from scratch and worked really hard to make it successful. I'm guessing at that time he was partying somewhat, but mostly just lived a normal life. I knew them then, but they never talked about their drinking or drug side of life, because I'm not into all of that, so it didn't come up in conversation. Gradually cocaine was being used more and more. He got nutty, she got snobby, but also really sick. That went on for years. She constantly had pneumonia. I was like, hey, you're really getting pneumonia a lot, the doctors need to find the root cause, you're too young for this to be happening. I didn't know what she was doing though. The wife is doing relatively well now from what I gather, but the husband is very much an addict. He looks very different, he's in and out of jail, he messages incoherent things randomly. It's very sad. Their whole story was so impressive until it unraveled. The last time I visited them they lived in an apartment that was the most expensive place I had ever even visited, and it wasn't even the only property they owned. Fuck it. I'm in the middle of this right now. The fastest you can fuck your life up is by not even giving life a try. I'm 35 years old and about to likely be homeless within the next year. I've never had any real life experiences. I'm extremely morbidly obese easily on the disability scale. I've never had a job other than helping my dad working newspapers. I never kept in touch with any friends, so much so, I completely avoided social interaction for 10 years after high school. Speaking of, I never got my high school diploma, even though I did actually put the extra work in for it one extra year due to skipping, including summer night Saturday school. So now that I'm 35, I finally feel the drive to change something. But, to add another problem on top of it all, I don't even have a social security number, never had any kind of government help because of this. So, I don't even know where to begin with life. I'm honestly probably going to end up dead before anything changes. But, you can definitely fuck up your life in the split second of never even having tried.
Streetcar racing in high school. Yes, illegally. My now husband and another friend we will call TF were setting up to race DH69 Camaro ZL1 versus TF69 Camaro Fastback. TF decides to do a spin out in the parking lot, blacktop was slick, he loses control and slammed into a crowd of our friends. Girl ended up pinned between TF's car and a light pole. TF was 16 and sent to a juvenile facility until he was 20. In and out of rehab since he was released. Girl was 15 and lost both of her legs, one below the knee and the other mid-thigh. Her family moved out of Texas.
The guy I knew in college was drunk at a party and decided to do a burnout in his car to impress people. As I understand it, he didn't turn off traction control, sped off down the street, and hit a telephone pole. He totaled his car, got a DUI, and his parents pulled him out of school. So figuratively and literally the fastest way to ruin it.
The weird thing is, we're probably all reading these things thinking they'd never happen to us, but that's probably exactly what those people would have thought before it happened to them.
My mom divorced my dad and it all went downhill from there. She became an alcoholic, as well as a smoker, was a prostitute, and was used many times when we were in the house. Me and my sister weren't even 6, locked us out of the house often, didn't feed us dinner or breakfast, etc. It finally stopped when she was arrested drunk with us in the backseat. She almost crashed the car.
I read a story about an Australian teen who was drinking with friends and got dared to eat a slug. The slug ended up passing rat lungworm infection to him, which made him extremely sick. He slipped into a coma which lasted 420 days, and after that he was completely paralyzed from the neck down and needed constant assistance and couldn't even speak. After 8 years, he passed away. His name was Sam Ballard. I'll link the story below. Just really crazy to read something like this, because what seemed to be a harmless dare that he did in front of his friends would end up completely ruining, and eventually ending, his life. I bet there was not a single thought in his mind that what he was about to do would drastically change everything about his life. Sam Ballard's story. Guy from my school went to rob a corner shop at knife point. He pulled up with his push bike, went into the store, and threatened the shopkeeper with a knife to give him all the money in the register. The shopkeeper refused, and the robber was too pussy to do anything, so he grabbed a pack of gum and ran out. 20 minutes later the robber realized he left his bike behind in his panic, so he went back to get it. This was at the same time the police were questioning the shopkeeper on the incident. They swiftly arrested him there and then. Think he got 2 years for stealing gum at knife point.
The beautiful friend I had, she took up with this good-looking charismatic guy. She changed almost immediately, became unreliable, started missing shifts at work. We had kind of drifted apart a bit because I hated her BF. He was too smarmy and smart-arsed for me. My spider sense went into overdrive whenever he was around. He had started cutting her off from her friends. I went to see her one day after she had missed so many shifts at work she was about to get fired. I lurked around until I was sure he wasn't there. Then I knocked on the door. When she answered she was a mess. She stank of sweat and something I couldn't identify. I barged into her flat and was so shocked at what I saw. She was so skinny. Her once lovely place was a filthy shambles. Trash everywhere, dirty clothes all over. I yelled at her, "WTF is going on? You're about to lose your job. You look like shit." She started crying. Her BF had introduced her to heroin almost immediately after they met and her life had spiraled out of control. She was addicted and he was pushing her to prostitution because he couldn't afford to pay for her habit anymore. She wasn't eating properly. Her diet was shit and she was risking her life because she was type 1 diabetic. I threw some clothes in a bag and dragged her out to my car. I took her straight to hospital. She was in for 3 weeks, detoxing while having her diabetes monitored so she didn't get too sick. I brought her home to my place. She'd been evicted from hers for non-payment of rent. I was so naive. She promised to never see him again. I really thought that everything would be okay. 2 days later I got home from work and found her dead on the bathroom floor. She died of an overdose. The needle was still in her arm. It was such a waste. My beautiful, vibrant, kind friend dead in less than 6 months after becoming a heroin addict.
Kid is 16, gets drunk and steals his friend's dad's car. Friend's dad is fuming. Kid panics, gets a gun and shoots the friend's dad in the head. Friend tried heroin once just to see what it was like, died from HIV/AIDS 8 years later, after being homeless pretty much since the first time. Guy gets drunk, decides he's the least drunk of 6 people, so drives back in his 5-seat car and drives into a wall, killing 2 of his friends. Guy wants to help defeat terrorist organization, so joins other terrorist organization, is a little too public about it, gets drunk and spills the beans about some people he really shouldn't tell anyone are involved. Gets killed by his own organization the next day. I think his terrorist career lasted about 3 weeks. Guy gets drunk and molests a sheep in full view of the church, no one talks to him, and he ends up moving away. TBF here, I only heard the first one and saw the aftermath of the third. The rest is mostly stuff that happened around where I grew up.
Dude I knew in college got his entire college loan sent to him in one installment at the start, turned out to be a massive mistake. He met a girl in the first semester of college who he had a major crush on. They got together early on in the semester, his first real relationship. He was madly in love and took her on holiday to do a big trip of Asia and Australia during the winter break. The guy was a hopeless romantic. He didn't plan the trip well at all and ended up in a lot of disastrous situations. No hotel for the night, no transport, running out of money, etc. Actual disaster. Dude got scammed hard in a couple countries as well. With all the stress, they were arguing all the time, they had a major fallout, and the girl drunkenly cheated on the guy in Australia about mid-trip. This was supposed to be a 4-week-long holiday. After they came back, he told us he basically spent his entire loan for the holiday plus took out some crazy high-interest loan to pay for his student accommodation, etc. He was gone before the exam started in first year, apparently had to declare bankruptcy. Just checking his Facebook, he seems to be heavily into the MGTOW thing.
Kid named William the first went to elementary school with. He had good grades, sang in choir, and even was voted most likely to succeed in our yearbook. Basically everyone treated him like a prodigy. We ended up in the same high school and saw him one day hanging out with these guys who used to cut school all the time. He ended up getting hooked on drugs and dropped out of school. Last time I saw him, I asked him why did he end up going this road. He just shrugged and walked away. Last I heard from him was that he committed suicide. He was only 16 at the time. We weren't close, but he was someone I basically grew up with.
Not a few seconds or minutes like some of these, and definitely not in as critical of a situation as some of the other stories, but my best friend growing up was not at all going to pursue more than a job he could get with only a high school education. He lucked out and found a job in a wholesale electrical parts warehouse. Turns out he has a natural affinity for driving big delivery trucks and maneuvering them into position better than anyone at the warehouse. He went from minimum wage to $16 per hour within 6 months. Then he was bumped up to an in-house position cutting wire, and that came with a massive raise to $23 an hour. He was slated to be promoted to one of 2 manager positions at the warehouse, which would have bumped him to $26 per hour, with a yearly raise of $2 until the ceiling of $30. Too bad he refused to give up smoking weed. I have nothing against drug use, but if you work at a place you feel connected to, as he did, and they have a no policy, it doesn't matter if it's legal or not legal. If you break policy, they're going to find out and you're toast. It doesn't matter if you think it's dumb. If you care about your job, stop doing the thing that breaks policy. My buddy wasn't immediately fired when he was screened, but he was supposed to be. Because he was one of their best employees and got along with everyone, because he always came to work prepared and early, didn't come to work high or have any negative noticeable habits that pointed to uncontrollable addiction in any regard. The owner of the company told him he would be randomly chosen in the next screening in plenty of time for his system to be clear. He failed that one too. And was given a third chance anyway. And also failed that one. Now he is the manager of a Taco Bell. Working for a salary that amounts to about $8 per hour, 12 hours a day, Monday-Friday. Which also means he is legally not paid overtime rates. Definitely not as dire as some of the other stories here, but he went from plans to buy his first new car and apply for a home loan to living in this small micro-apartment in his mother's backyard, living paycheck to paycheck. It's been about 4 to 5 years since, and he's still at that Taco Bell. TLDR. Best friend was given 3 chances to stop smoking weed at his $23 per hour job. He didn't even try. Now he works at Taco Bell 60 hours a week, not getting paid overtime, for about $8 an hour.
Getting busted having an affair is usually a quick road to ruin.
I was lucky enough to be able to work for Dell when it first started going. We were less than 200 employees when my coworker accident hit reply all on an inappropriate email meant for just one other person. He was fired on the spot. Being one of the first 200 employees at Dell is equivalent to winning the lottery. Added. Everyone, I will come clean. This isn't my story, it's my father's. I figured it would be easier just to say it's me BC Reddit, but whatever. Regardless of the hate it may get, I want to keep this out here. There truly was someone that got fired from Dell for making a stupid joke and clicking a wrong button. Don't be that guy. Love y'all.
Very sad story. The guy had a fantastic partner and lived in a happy relationship, a great career, was highly respected in the organization with further promotion round the corner, with room for working on a PhD project on the side, and had saved a considerable amount of money to buy his own flat. Then he started taking crystal meth, just for the party fun. Within a little more than just 1 year, he lost his money his partner, and his job in a way that would make future employment in his profession highly unlikely, everything he had been building up in the past 15 years. After another couple of months, he killed himself. The lesson of this? Don't do crystal meth. It is too difficult to control. When you have taken it, you are overconfident and not able to honestly examine your life. When your high has finished, you are too depressed and too much craving another round to thoroughly examine your life. Once you are hooked, there is simply no point of time at which you are able to fully realize what you are doing to your life and your loved ones.
A few years ago in the Navy, I was serving as the officer of the day. For our shore command, this was basically night watchman. Shortly after working hours, 2 young enlisted students came into the Master-at-Arms office where I was hanging out with my counterpart, a chief. "Pete, test us right now," they said. "We've been out in the car smoking pot all afternoon. We want out of the Navy." Chief immediately replied, "Shut the fuck up and get out of here right now, and I'll forget this all ever happened." "Nope, we want out, we're high as kites and want a piss test." After we took the samples, sealed them, etc. We sat there with these kids while the Master-at-Arms did the final paperwork, and Chief asked these kids, "Okay, what's the brilliant plan now?" "Well, now that I'm done with the Navy, I'm going to use my GI Bill to go back to college and be an engineer." Folks, being discharged for marijuana use is a dishonorable discharge, which means you don't get the GI Bill and instead have roughly the equivalent of a felony conviction on your record for life. I watched as the chief explained that fact, and the kid's eyes darted to the already sealed and signed for container of his urine that he could never get back. Watched the realization that he has just picked up a felony by choice when he had been offered every chance to walk away. While he realized that more than half his funding plan for college had just disappeared, along with his eligibility for lots of loan programs. That is a facial expression I will never forget.
My dad tells me to never speed in the Walmart parking lot for this type of reason. It's not worth the 4 seconds you save. A lot of moms come to Walmart. And who often comes with mom? Her children. If you hit a child, your life could be over in a few seconds. Just a few seconds. If you like what you see, please comment, like and subscribe.